Welcome to the many interpretations of Amargasaurus. Amargasaurus is a dicraeosaurid that lived in the early Cretaceous of what is now Argentina. It went extinct around 120 million years ago. Now listen very closely. Dicraeosaurids are awesome. Dicraeosauridae is probably my favorite sauropod group. The reason why that is because they, in a lot of ways, they kind of feel like the opposite of what you would expect a sauropod to be. They were relatively small by sauropod standards, and they had relatively short necks, again, by sauropod standards. I mean, just compare Amargasaurus to something like a titanosaur, and it's very clear how unique this family is. Amargasaurus would weigh around 2 to 4 metric tons, again, which is pretty small for a sauropod, generally speaking. And don't even get me started about Brachytrachelopan. This guy is amazing, but I'll save it for a future video. Now, as far as Amargasaurus goes, there's not too many media depictions of them, but there are some very interesting ones to take a look at, and we have some pretty fun topics to dive into here. So without further ado, let's get right into it. The journey starts off with The Land Before Time, the Great Long Neck Migration. I used to love this one as a child. There's just something about it. The music was really nice. The visuals were really cool and good and everything. There's something about it that just feels oddly calming. I don't know if I'm just like extremely nostalgic for it, watching it on VHS before I went to bed. But it was a great time. It's a great movie. I liked it. Now, because this is a movie that's completely centered around a bunch of sauropods coming together to go to a place, there's a lot of different sauropods that make an appearance. And they certainly did take advantage of that because it seems like you can find a lot of different species in this group. One of those species being Amargasaurus. And here's what it looks like. This is a Land Before Time version of Amargasaurus. And, it looks probably exactly how you would expect it to look. It's got like the traditional Land Before Time sauropod body shape, but with some like 2 little sails on its neck. Now, Amargasaurus did have tall spines that extended from its neck vertebrae. In fact, it had 2 rows of them that went down its neck and went down its back, at the very least all the way down to the hips. They might have extended past that, but we don't have much more postcranial material after the hips. Now, one of the biggest debates in paleontology about Amargasaurus is what those spines looked like in life, because they most likely were not just exposed bone, of course. There has been hypotheses in the past that they might have been layered in keratin and formed these really interesting looking spikes that could have been used for defense or just as a predator deterrent, while others have hypothesized that it might have been covered in a sort of sail-like structure and it had like 2 sails that were going down its neck. Now, we don't have a solid answer right now, but there was a paper published back in 2022 that took a very close look at these spines. And the conclusion was that they seemed a lot more in line with structures that would have been covered up by soft tissue, as opposed to structures that would have been layered in keratin. So it seems likely that Amargasaurus just had 2 sails on its neck, as opposed to really gnarly looking spikes. The paper did also mention that we still need more data before we can say anything that's a lot more conclusive, but right now, that just seems a lot more likely. So it seems that The Land Before Time here went with the more likely option in the fact that it's kind of like all of the spines are linked together with soft tissue. I don't know if it would have looked quite like this per se, but it's definitely on the right track. As far as everything else goes, it doesn't have any tall spines on its back, which Amargasaurus definitely did. So that is something that is incorrect, but of course, The Land Before Time has always had extremely stylized designs, so it makes sense that you would see that here as well. It's just cool that Amargasaurus made an appearance in the first place. I also noticed that I think its nostrils are a little bit too high up. They should probably be a bit closer to the mouth. Regardless, like I said, still very cool that we got to see Amargasaurus in this movie. After that is Dinosaur King. We have this handsome fellow right here. And our first depiction that shows the spines as being structures layered in keratin, thereby making extremely sharp spikes on its neck. Like I said previously, that is a little bit less likely than something that's covered in soft tissue. So this is a little bit more outdated in that way. However, they do have the tall spines on its back that go all the way down to the hips, like I said, which is something that Amargasaurus had. They also did give it an elongated snout, which is also pretty likely for the animal. We don't have much of the skull of Amargasaurus, just the back part pretty much, but when you compare it to close relatives, it is likely that it did have a sort of horse-like snout, essentially, where it's a little bit more elongated, kind of thin. The whole shape of it looks pretty good. It seems like it might be a little bit too large, but generally speaking, this is a fairly good Amargasaurus reconstruction. After that, we have bizarre dinosaurs, and it seems like this pretty much checks all the boxes. We have an elongated snout, we have the sails on its neck, and we have the sails going all the way down to its back and a little bit past the tail, which is pretty likely. All of the proportions seem to be there. You know, one thing you could probably say is that it's a little bit skinny. Like, it's for a sauropod especially, I'm sure there'd be a little bit more bulk to these guys. But all in all, this is a fairly decent reconstruction of the animal. I don't despise it, that's for sure. And then we move on to dinosaur train. So again, the whole shape seems to be there. The relatively long snout, the sail that goes starts from the neck and goes all the way down to the back, and the colors. These colors are really cool. Like the blues with the greens and the yellows. I like that. It's very pleasing for the eye. It feels very reptilian. And it's especially cool to see sauropods with bright colorations, as oftentimes, at least in the past, they were portrayed as like relatively dull animals. So it's always cool to see them brightly colored. I also want to talk about this shot right here, where the Amargasaurus is kind of like close up to the camera and you can really see those teeth. I'm sure that the teeth were a big talking point in the episode. Unfortunately, I haven't watched this one yet. I have seen a few episodes with my daughter recently, but this one has not shown up in the rotation, unfortunately. But I want to say that those teeth are actually pretty close to what sauropod teeth are actually like, and what Amargasaurus's teeth were probably like. See, they're very pencil-like, and they kind of create these really strange-looking rows at the front of the mouth. Those are absolutely ideal for stripping vegetation off of branches. Which is precisely how sauropods likely ate their food. See, sauropods didn't have the proper jaws to chew their food. They could not grind up plant material like ceratopsians or hadrosaurs. So instead, what they would do is pretend this hand is a branch right here with a bunch of leaves on it, and pretend that this hand right here is a sauropod mouth. What they would do is they would bite onto the branch and then just strip off the vegetation, and then they would swallow it whole. Now, they probably had a pretty complex digestive system that would break down that tough plant material, but it's also a possibility that at the very least some species of sauropod would swallow these stones called gastroliths, and then those gastroliths would grind up the tough plant material as well. Either way, these guys were not chewing their food. They were just swallowing it all whole. And yeah, those teeth are actually pretty close to what those teeth look like on actual sauropods. After that, we have Dino Dan. Again, right off the bat, I want to talk about the colors. These colors are really eye-catching. The blues with the reds and the oranges, they're very nice, very pleasing for the eye. All of the proportions seem to be here as well. The head shape seems to be pretty consistent with what is likely for the animal. It seems to have those teeth, as we can see in this shot right here. It has the 2 rows of spines that go down the neck and also go down the back, and the proportions of a sauropod, a relatively long neck, but not one that's too long. Everything seems to match up decently well, I suppose. Then we can move on to the Jurassic franchise. Now, Amargasaurus never actually made an appearance in a Jurassic franchise movie or show, which is a little bit unfortunate. Bahatosaurus almost showed up in Chaos Theory. Little fun fact, it would have shown up at the gas station instead of the Nazutoceratops in season 1. That would have been cool, but Amargasaurus is kind of in the same boat. It kind of almost hadn't made an appearance in Fallen Kingdom, in the Lockwood Manor. Not as an actual dinosaur running around, but rather just as one of the paintings that you see in that sort of exhibit hall that Lockwood had. Here's what the concept art looks like. As you can see, it only made it to the concept art stage, so that's, they probably didn't consider it any further than that. Which is a bit unfortunate, because I kind of like the way that it looks right here. It actually looks like a fairly accurate reconstruction, like modern reconstruction of Amargasaurus. So I certainly wouldn't have minded that. I mean, it would have just been in the background, like the other murals that have been painted, but still, it would have been a cool thing to see. It's like, oh wow, that's Amargasaurus, and then Indoraptor stuff. Shenanigans. But Amargasaurus does show up in a few different Jurassic franchise games, like Jurassic World the game. Now, the level 0 version of this animal has like a mixture of a sail on its back and the keratinous spines on the neck. As I said before, the sail is probably a little bit more likely. However, when you level it up to level 40, it gets a sail on its whole back and some purple. A purple coloration is applied to it, which is really interesting to see. And also look at that tail. It's got like little structures towards the end of it. That is an interesting take. I It's unique. You know, I don't think we've seen one like that thus far. Some of the same things can be said about the Jurassic World Alive Amargasaurus. It's not really too different from the one from Jurassic World the game, or at least the level 0 one, in the fact that it has keratinous spines on its neck and a sail on its back. So there's really not much else I can add to this fella. And now we have Jurassic World Evolution. So in a lot of ways, it kind of seems like a mixture of the two most popular interpretations of Amargasaurus. You have a little bit of a sail covering up a decent portion of the neural spines that it has on its neck vertebrae. But then the top of that sail has spikes, you know, the keratinous spikes covering like the tips of them, which is probably, again, not too likely given our current data. However, the spines on the back are covered up and kind of look like a hump more so than anything, which I think is pretty interesting. Even they have some small spikes going on, though. The head shape looks pretty good, though. It looks how you would expect, based off of close relatives, of course, with the, you know, that long, thinner snout, and the nostrils are actually in the correct position, which is overall pretty good. So all around, it's not really a bad depiction. It covers, what was that? Did you do a push-up? You have to do a push-up real quick? Was that the goal there? But, you know, all around, it's definitely not a bad interpretation of Amargasaurus, and you can certainly tell that it's meant to be Amargasaurus. We got an animation, ladies and gentlemen. Aww. Aww, it's so cute. It's adorable, really. Yeah, again, you can tell that it's meant to be Amargasaurus, and it's certainly interesting that they kind of combined both interpretations of the neural spines for Amargasaurus. So yeah, that is Jurassic World Evolution. Then we have fossil fighters, represented through Amargo. Here is his name. No, it looks pretty good. You know, despite the fact that this is incredibly stylized, you know, it has like reduced proportions and everything, that actually really fits a Dicraeosaurid, considering the fact that they are already kind of like reduced sauropods. Now, much like the previous two interpretations that we looked at, it just has keratinous spines on its neck and it has like a sail on its back. The colors are really cool, though. I really like the black and the red. Those are two colors that always go together nicely. And yeah, no, everything else looks fairly decent. You can certainly tell what this is meant to be. There is also Aurorus, which is, of course, a Pokemon. Little fun fact, I'm actually going to be going to the fossil Pokemon exhibit at the Field Museum here in like a few weeks. I'm so excited. It's going to be awesome. Anyway, this is what Aurorus looks like. And man, I really like it. You know, obviously, this is not meant to be an actual Amargasaurus. Rather, it's most likely just inspired from Amargasaurus. But they did it in like the most majestic way possible with these really like eye-catching and beautiful structures on the neck. It doesn't have a sail on its back, of course, but still, everything like that all looks really, really cool. So this has to be one of my favorite like stylized interpretations of Amargasaurus out there. Like, again, it looks so cool. It doesn't top Tyrantrum for me, but this is probably a close second. I think it's really cool. So get ready for some fossil Pokemon content over the next few weeks after we go to that exhibit. It's gonna be really cool. Path of Titans, of course, has Amargasaurus, and recently they actually had a TLC that I believe updated the model a little bit. I think that it looks really good all around. First, we have the Kazai model, which is like the species of Amargasaurus that we know about, and this one is probably the most accurate one. In fact, this might be probably like the most accurate depiction of Amargasaurus in this video all around. You have the two sails going down its neck, and then the sail going down its back, and even going past the hips, which is pretty possible overall. You also have the elongated snout with nostrils close to the mouth, relatively short neck, small size all around. Even the limbs look pretty good. I don't think we talked about Amargasaurus limbs too much in this video, but you would see something like this, especially with that thumb claw right there where my cursor is, and especially these weird feet in the back. Now there's different models. There's this one right here, Angulus, which is, I believe, kind of like a combination of the two, much like Jurassic World Evolution, where you have a little bit of a sail going on here, but then it turns into keratinous spikes. All of the proportions are still good on this one as well. And then you have Ceratus, which mostly just has the keratinous. mostly just have the keratinous spines that go all the way down, basically the whole length of its body. Yeah, and that's all three of them. They're all really good, you know. And I really quite like them, especially with, you know, of course, this one being my absolute favorite. I think it looks so cool. Such a strange sauropod all around. Like, what were you doing? That is so crazy. We'll go ahead and check out the animations real quick. So just look at it. Look at it as it just walks through the environment. It seriously was an incredibly strange dinosaur. Just, you know, even strange by sauropod standards, and you just have to love it because of that. Dicraeosaurids are just such cool animals. Man, yeah, that is Amargasaurus, ladies and gentlemen. The teeth look correct as well. You'll love to see it. And there we have it. That was Amargasaurus. I'm sorry it took me so long to get to this video. Life has just been extremely hectic, and I've been trying to do so many different projects at once that unfortunately this one just kind of like fell through the cracks. But we got it done. We got our chance to talk a little bit more about Amargasaurus, and it was really it was a great treat to get to research Amargasaurus again after it's been a while since I've looked into this animal. But it's a very cool animal, very eye-catching, one of the most unique sauropods out there. Heck, even one of the most unique dinosaurs out there. It's a real sight. You know, it's a cool dinosaur. I very much like it. That's pretty much all I have for this one, though. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have an awesome day.